Hello, my name is Megan, and I did my internship with adults at Crosswinds Counseling and Wellness here in Emporia. I started there in early August, and I'm still employed, but I finished my 90 hours. My information is down below, as well as my supervisor, Samantha Bond. Her email is there as well. The population that I worked with was mostly the adults in Lyon County. That's who my clients were. Most of what I did was help to improve ADLs, which are activities of daily living. And these can include personal hygiene, making out lists for grocery shopping, learning to cook, keeping their environment clean, managing their symptoms, which I worked with a lot of adults with major depressive disorder. And so talking out a lot of things and making sure they're using their coping mechanisms. And then I worked and helped them improve communication, and that's between either their team, which will include me, their therapist, their case manager, and anybody else involved. And this can also include their families. A lot of my clients needed help to reach out to their families a little bit, and then also their social skills. One of the biggest things that I have done with my clients is take them out into the environment and into the community that we are in and encourage them to have appropriate social skills and redirect them if they need. And my responsibilities, I met with clients weekly and sometimes twice a week, depending on what their treatment plan called for. I provided encouragement and support during their struggles, especially if it was something involving COVID and the emotional stress that we're all feeling right now. I helped assess their mood, and this could be something from straight up asking them, "What's your mood like today?" to using their body language and other things once you know the client a little better to assess. And then I also recorded detailed progress notes as part of my job. And at Crosswinds, these are due within 48 hours of meeting, so it's really important to stay on top of those. The two theories that I chose, I worked with attachment theory and also Erickson's stages of development. With the attachment theory, this can predict our relationships in the future from the time that we're very young. So our attachment to our caregivers sets up our future relationships. And one of the articles that I found said that leaving babies to cry it out can cause synaptic damage, excessive cortisol secretion, damage to the vagus nerve, and the inability to trust later in life. With these sorts of things, with the limited work that I've done with children, especially, this can create a distrust with us, and having to form that relationship can be a little more difficult if they've got those turbulent home lives. Another article said individuals with lower quality relationships experience poorer physical health as well as poorer social and psychological outcomes, and these links are partially explained by their experienced emotions. In this case, the article went on to say that in a situation when the child was younger, if they didn't have their needs met, then they can have troubles with trying to express those later in life, or if they didn't get certain hygienic things met, then they can struggle with those as well. And then my last article for this said that children lack important things to properly make correct causal links with events. And this is because children are learning constantly and they don't have all of this ready for them quite yet. And so if they don't have the guidance to make different links, then they will just make inappropriate ones, and that can go on to affect their futures. Part 2 of the application of theory is the Erickson stages of development. So my article by Good Case and Love said that the US population of older adults, which is 65 and up, is growing, and these adults have found meaning in their lives, feel that they have achieved important goals, and have found peace prior to death, but this is not always a peaceful stage. The reason for this is that during the stage, if they don't feel like that, especially if they're in concern with their family members, this is a stage of trying to say goodbye and wrap up everything. And if family is messy still, there can be instances where they're not at peace with that. And I have experienced that with a few of my clients who are in their 60s trying to reach back out to family and not having great success with it. This article also said it is not uncommon for those working with older populations to overlook how older individuals are still developing. And if the individual is not content with the life that was led, it is likely that the individual will experience despair instead of integrity. That came from the first article as the first quote, same article as the first quote. And it is basically saying that those individuals who are in this stage are still developing and they are not done, and that can be overlooked and that can cause issues with it. And as I mentioned before, if there's, say, issues with the family that haven't been resolved yet, that can lead them to feel despair instead of that integrity of that stage. Slater said that the survival of the human species depends on the willingness of parents to take care of children. And this is relating to people deciding to have children, and then also once they have children, like going through those stages of development with them and just having that proper nurturing. Because if someone doesn't have children, then that's that. But if they have children and then they develop into a way that can cause severe damage, then that's another way that the human species isn't surviving as typically as it should, and it's not functioning well. And then Malone said that those who have difficulty meeting these developmental challenges were thought by Erickson to be more vulnerable to emotional distress and stagnation as they aged. So this quote was talking about how at the beginning of life, if they didn't have these stages met and they weren't fostered properly, then this can just go on as we get older and into that older period of life. And it can lead us to be more vulnerable to that distress and not feeling satisfied with our lives. Insights and conclusions. So all ages show signs of their attachment styles that they have learned, but it can be especially apparent in children when you work with them. It's important to know these because treatments of each client can be altered based on their attachment style, and it can show up in how we have a relationship with them. So certain clients can not want to build up that trust as easily, and I have had a few clients that it's taken weeks and some even a month or so, just trying to like show that support and let them build up that trust, because it doesn't come easily, and with their past experiences it can be difficult. And with Erickson's stages with my internship, these stages of development cover from birth to death, and it's important to recognize that the adults are still developing, especially as we work with adults that are in their 60s as I do. Knowing the stage of development that the client is in can get a lot of insight into their lives. As I said earlier, one of my clients is in their 60s and they have family issues, and so trying to settle some things like that can lead to that discomfort that the Erickson stages was talking about. And if this is a child, then knowing like what things they're worried about and concerned about as they try to make their way through life. And then by knowing the challenges of a client's current stage of development, treatment is more individualized. So as I said, knowing where the client is really important, because you can sort of put yourself back in that mentality and know where they're coming from rather than just trying to guess. And these are my references.